Abigail was awakened by her grandchildren every morning. Gwen and Ben engaged in a battle for the right to be the first ones in the bathroom. The running around the apartment was always accompanied by shouts. Initially, the elderly woman couldn't get used to their morning antics, but after a year of living in the same apartment with her son's family, she learned to ignore the noisy battles of her grandchildren. Noticing that Grandma was awake, the kids greeted her loudly. "Grandma, good morning. Have you already woken up?" "Grandma, tell Ben that he's getting too bold. Girls need to go first, but he's always trying to rush ahead because you'll hog the bathroom for half an hour, and then I won't have time to have a proper breakfast." The quarrel of the youngsters was stopped by the authoritative shout of the daughter-in-law. "Why are you screaming so loudly in the morning? You woke up Grandma." Resourceful Gwen retorted to her mother, "Of course, we'll wake up Grandma because it's uncomfortable for her to sleep here. Let her live in our room. It's cold here with constant drafts." The girl had raised this issue many times, which irritated Sarah greatly. "None of your business. We don't have the luxury of giving everyone their own room, and Grandma chose the hallway herself. Let's wash up and have breakfast." Abigail had adapted well to the household routine. She knew that her daughter-in-law would feed the children first, then invite her to the table. When the woman had just moved in permanently, she used to eat with her grandchildren. However, Sarah was bothered by the fact that her mother-in-law chewed loudly during meals. "Abigail, could you try to eat more politely? What example are you setting for the grandchildren?" This remark hurt the elderly woman deeply, and she tried to justify her lack of manners. "Sarah, you know it's a consequence of the stroke. Look, my right leg still hasn't recovered, and my right hand doesn't work well. It's because you, Abigail, don't want to do anything about it. What did the doctor advise you? Walk more, exercise, and you spend almost the whole day in bed." "I would gladly take a walk, Sarah, but you see how difficult it is for me to even come down from the second floor. And what kind of exercise at 77? The daughter-in-law shook her head irritably. "You have an excuse for everything. I often see elderly women on the street jogging in the morning. You could also take up Nordic walking." The elderly woman looked surprised at her son's wife. "What kind of walking?" "Well, you've probably seen it on TV. You just walk with poles, similar to ski poles." "Sarah, I already have a cane." "True, it's just one." The woman demonstrated her walking stick, which she hadn't parted with for the past few years. The daughter-in-law, pouting her lips in offense, remarked, "You find everything amusing, but you don't want to think about your health. What's the point of talking to you?" Usually, after the moralizing, the daughter-in-law disappeared into the kitchen. The bad mood could be judged by the clatter of dishes. Abigail tried to explain to her son's wife that it was too late for her to change her lifestyle, but she refused to listen. These disagreements between the two women greatly affected the atmosphere in the house. Sometimes it seemed that the air in the apartment was filled with electric discharges. Trevor noticed that his mother and wife couldn't find common ground, and it bothered him a lot. More than once, he asked Sarah to be gentler with his mother, to which she rudely replied, "I'm not going to play nice in front of your mommy. By the way, she's living in my house." Such injustice outraged the man. "You probably forgot, Sarah, that Mom sold a nice house so that we could buy this apartment. And honestly, I don't like that she's living in the hallway. Where do you suggest I settle her? With the kids, so she can fill the entire room with her ointments? Your dearly beloved mother-in-law doesn't even wash herself every day. God forbid, she might infect the children with some kind of infection. Instead of criticizing her, you should help her. And I don't want to hear any more talk about this apartment. My mom has the right to a normal life here. She's not living here on a whim. Don't forget that she contributes her pension." "Oh, what's that pension?" "Pitiful pennies, Sarah. By the way, you don't contribute a single ruble to the family budget. Don't forget about that. Such conversations infuriated the daughter-in-law, but she usually vented her frustration on her mother-in-law. Waiting for her husband and children to leave the house, the woman began to nag her mother-in-law with comments. She nitpicked every little thing she didn't like, how her husband's mother put on slippers, or she found fault with the unmade bed. But most of all, the daughter-in-law disliked Abigail's appetite. When she ate, it was as if she was watching every bite. At your age, you should moderate your appetite. For a while, the elderly woman tried to eat in the hallway where she slept, but the daughter-in-law immediately protested. I don't want you messing up the hallway. Look, there are already crumbs all over the floor and greasy stains. The constant scrutiny from the daughter-in-law weighed on the elderly woman, and to avoid constantly annoying Sarah, she started eating in secret. But the ever-watchful daughter-in-law noticed that her mother-in-law was hiding cookies and other food under her pillow. She confronted her. When will you ever be satisfied? Do you realize that an excessive appetite is harmful for elderly people? It's a direct path to a heart attack and a second stroke. If you got lucky the first time, the second time could lead to paralysis. And who will take care of you then? Do you expect me to do it? Forget it, Abigail couldn't take it anymore. Why don't you just throw me out like garbage, Sarah? Then I won't bother you and won't eat either. The daughter-in-law erupted like a hornet. Do you have no shame saying such things? You were taken in, warmed up, and you. I regret, Sarah, that I listened to you. I shouldn't have sold my house. But the neighbors warned me, Madison's friend warned me that I would regret it 1,000 times. Smart people saw it coming. I've been listening to your reproaches for a whole year. And as for conscience, maybe you should think about yours. The daughter-in-law didn't expect her mother-in-law to counterattack. Caught off guard, she began to choke with outrage. Her face turned a shade of crimson, and her eyes glowed with furious fire. The troublemaker air hovered over her mother-in-law and hissed, "Old hag, I'll still send you to a nursing home." You're lying. You won't. Why not? Because then you won't get my pension. At the mention of this source of income, the daughter-in-law fell silent. She abruptly turned 180 degrees and disappeared into the kitchen. A second later, the sound of dishes being banged echoed from there. Abigail also wanted to vent her accumulated negativity on inanimate objects, but knowing what it could lead to, she only whispered quietly, "Pots and plates, they'll soon start talking." From such treatment, the elderly woman's message hit the right target. The barrage of irritating sounds was complemented by the sound of shattered glass. Sarah immediately commented on her blunder loudly enough for her detested mother-in-law to hear. "Probably the old witch cursed me. Everything is falling out of my hands today." With each passing day, the relationship deteriorated further. If Sarah used to silently hate her mother-in-law, she now moved on to open hostilities. This was because she realized that her mother-in-law didn't want to be the cause of scandals with Trevor, so she didn't tell him anything. And if she didn't tell him anything, she could take out her frustrations on her very severely. Now she could shout, insult, and make sure that Abigail went hungry for real. Sarah reveled in her power and impunity. However, Trevor suspected that almost every day similar clashes occurred between his wife and his mother. He hoped that everything would calm down on its own. Abigail also endured for a long time and didn't say anything to Trevor about the scandals. Sarah was afraid that her husband would not take her side in the situation and would defend his mother. Such a tense atmosphere had prevailed in the house for over a year, but there was no sign of relief because with each passing day, Sarah hated her mother-in-law even more. The mere awareness of her close presence irritated the young woman. Abigail, on the other hand, had tried many times to establish a connection with her son's wife. In the first months after moving to the new apartment, she helped her in the kitchen, but the daughter-in-law sneered, "I don't like your cooking. You put too much meat without measure, and you love to overcook it. Such food is harmful to health." I worked in a canteen for so many years, and no one got poisoned. Trevor's late father also liked how I cooked. If you don't like my dishes, how about I peel potatoes or wash the dishes? But the daughter-in-law arrogantly refused the offered help. I can handle housework on my own. And besides, you're an experienced woman, you know well that there should be only one mistress in the kitchen. After that, Abigail didn't try to change the situation. She obediently waited for Sarah to relent and invite her to the table. When the daughter-in-law tossed a plate in front of her, the elderly woman struggled to consume the tasteless, bland food. Constant nervous tension and malnutrition took a toll on her health. She rapidly lost weight. She often complained of dizziness. But what bothered Abigail the most was hunger. She constantly wanted to eat, and stomach cramps prevented her from sleeping at night. Perhaps the elderly woman wouldn't have endured this hunger torture for long if it weren't for her grandchildren. Gwen and Ben were old enough to understand the real situation. The children tried to secretly feed their grandmother. Today, before hiding behind the door, Gwen tucked a sandwich with sausage wrapped in a napkin into the pocket of her grandmother's robe. Now she waited for the right moment to enjoy the treat. But Sarah was moving back and forth from the kitchen to the room like a clockwork, and finally, she said with bitterness in her voice, "Go have breakfast. I made porridge for you today. Maybe it will satisfy your hearty appetite." Abigail didn't wait for a repeated invitation and went to the kitchen. On the table was a plate of liquid blue semina. The elderly woman tried to swallow the tasteless liquid mass, but immediately felt strong nausea. Barely audible, she whispered, "At least you could have added some butter. Can this be eaten?" But Sarah, who was always on the alert, caught this remark from a distance. "Wouldn't it be too fatty for you, madam, to eat porridge with butter? She's not satisfied, you see. I especially cook her separate dietary dishes, and she, ungrateful, turns up her nose." Abigail guiltily said, "Sarah, I'm not complaining, but this really isn't tasty. The porridge is cold with lumps. You probably cooked it with water. If you had added a drop of milk, it would have tasted better." The daughter-in-law snatched the plate and threw it into the sink. "Don't like it, then go hungry." The mother-in-law obediently headed to the hallway, which confined her entire living space. She could no longer contain the unbearable grievances accumulated over the year. Despair flooded from the elderly woman's eyes with streams of tears, but the daughter-in-law paid no attention to her suffering. She demonstratively started vacuuming right at her feet, then began to mop the floor, adding a generous portion of chlorine solution to the bucket. Abigail almost choked. What was the need to wash the floors in the apartment with chlorine? Probably to show how everything around the grandmother needed to be disinfected. It was hurtful and painful, especially since Abigail had mentioned several times that the smell of chlorine made her sick. But for the daughter-in-law, those words turned out to be a call to action. If in other rooms she washed the floor, adding something pleasantly smelling to the water, then in the hallway where Abigail resided, it was chlorine and in large quantities. Having finished cleaning, Sarah headed to take a shower. Abigail decided to make the most of the daughter-in-law's absence. First, she retrieved the sandwiches that Gwen had slipped into her pocket in the morning. Then she called her longtime friend Madison to share her sorrows. "You were so right when you advised me against selling the house, Madison dear. You can't imagine the hell I'm living in. My daughter-in-law has squeezed the life out of me, scolding me even for a piece of bread." A sigh came from the other end of the line, a friend Abigail hadn't seen for a whole year. "And why do you endure it? Tell Trevor, let him take action. I don't want to create discord in the family, they have children. But you're a living person, and besides, this horror can't go on forever. Listen, Abigail, I've had a good idea. Move in with me, we'll have more fun together. With you, we definitely won't be quarreling. Madison dear, thank you, you know I'll probably consider your offer. I won't be a burden to you, and I have a good pension. Yes, of course, you won't be a burden. What nonsense is that? We always got along well, and now without you, it's boring for me. Together, we would live wonderfully. Abigail immediately envisioned this scenario. Indeed, with Madison, she would feel like a human being. She could eat as much as she wanted and go for walks without having to climb stairs. For a long time, as soon as Abigail managed to hide the phone, Sarah emerged from the bath. She cast a suspicious glance at her mother-in-law but remained silent. In the evening, Trevor announced that he had decided to invite his colleagues for his birthday. Sarah reacted to this news without obvious displeasure. And how do you imagine this event? Maybe it's better to book a table at a restaurant. I don't understand why you're so embarrassed. Or is it difficult for you to prepare a few snacks? Sarah shrugged. What kind of rural manners are these, organizing parties at home? Civilized people celebrate all their events in a restaurant. Long ago, it's normal for the wife not to be burdened with cooking. She should put on a fancy dress and spend a few hours in a salon, not standing at the stove and then deal with the dishes. But she couldn't say this to Trevor. She understood it would make him angry. Well, fine, as you wish. Abigail couldn't even imagine that the daughter-in-law would cause another scandal at her husband's birthday. But initially, everything went smoothly. The couple purchased the necessary supplies from the market and planned a festive menu. The daughter-in-law didn't bother Abigail in the days leading up to the celebration, so she relaxed a little. On the appointed day, Sarah started preparing in the morning, but as before, she persistently ignored Abigail. Only before the guests left, as if casually, she said to her husband Trevor, "Do you think it's normal for your mother to be here when your colleagues come? I've already told you she deserves a separate room. And where will I get that room?" Sarah raised her voice immediately. Why should she endure discomfort because of this old woman? Doesn't Trevor understand that she only brings problems? Why hasn't he done anything about it yet? Give up yours. We have 4 separate rooms in our apartment, and for some reason, my mother lives in the hallway. Sarah had no choice but to temporarily move Abigail to her own apartment, but she strictly ordered the elderly woman not to show herself when the guests arrived. For once in your life, do something useful for your son. Hide and don't show yourself. Heaven forbid his colleagues see you. Do I really look like a monster? Fine, as you wish, Sarah. I'll try not to darken your holiday with my presence. But in the soul of the elderly woman, a real storm was raging. After all, she had given life to Trevor. His birthday had long become the main celebration of her life. From Sarah's room, Abigail could clearly hear the guests congratulating her son on his anniversary. The kind words warmed the mother's heart, and she eagerly caught every wish directed towards Trevor. As the celebration was in full swing, the door suddenly swung open, revealing Trevor at the threshold. And now, dear friends, I want to introduce you to the most important person in my life. The man entered the room and took his mother by the hand. She looked at him with concern. What was he doing? Sarah would not be pleased. She might not let Abigail live this down. Didn't her son realize that he was on the brink of a grand scandal? But it seemed that Trevor didn't care about Sarah or anything else. Mom, come on, you shouldn't hide on such a day. Let's go, guests are waiting for us. The elderly woman's head spun from the bright light. She timidly went to the table, and Trevor immediately offered her a chair. Then the son made a very solemn toast in honor of his mother, and the attendees supported him with loud applause. Friends, I'm glad to see you here, and I'm glad that my mom is celebrating this holiday with me. She worked for many years in a regular canteen, cooking food for field workers and mechanics, always at the forefront of the harvest. For her labor achievements, Abigail received state awards. Now my mom is retired, but she continues to actively help me, my wife, and grandchildren. Abigail basked in the attention of everyone, but suddenly, she felt the hateful gaze of her daughter-in-law. Unexpectedly for everyone, she stood up with a raised glass and said, "I want to add to my husband's bright speech." He talked a lot about his mother but forgot to mention that the well-being in the house is my merit. I have to maintain comfort and cleanliness, and it's very difficult when there's a person of such age in the house. Confused, Trevor tried to turn everything into a joke. My women always create coziness in the apartment, so today all of them both deserve the most heartfelt words. But Sarah was clearly set for a scandal. She wanted to say something else, but unexpectedly, Abigail began to sing a folk song. Her deep voice touched everyone with sincerity, and many joined in the familiar tune. Seeing that no one paid attention to her, Sarah demonstratively left the table. A minute later, a knock on the front door was heard, but her departure did not spoil the festive mood. Abigail took control of the celebration in her experienced hands and happily assisted Gwen. After the guests left, the grandmother and granddaughter quickly cleared the table and washed the dishes. Watching their coordinated work, Trevor suddenly noticed, "I always, Mom, dreamed that everyone would be happy in my house. Today you gave us a real holiday, thank you. And Gwen, thank you too, you are the best." Abigail hesitated as she began the conversation she had been preparing for the past few days. "Trevor, I see that my presence is causing discord in your family. That's why I've decided to move out." Trevor was stunned by his mother's unexpected announcement. Although it was to be expected as her own son, he had done nothing to make his mother comfortable and happy in his home. He allowed Sarah to settle his mother in the hallway as if she were some stray dog. "Where are you going to move, Mom? Your house has been sold, and you have every right to your square meters in this apartment, son. It's hard for me here. I'm tired. I want some peace. Madison, you know her well, offered me to stay with her. I agreed. I'll pack my things, and you can take me there. Two old women will be fine together, and things will work out between you and Sarah." Trevor stood up and paced around the kitchen. How could he allow this to happen? The dearest person in the world was suffering, and Trevor didn't even notice. "Enough, this can't go on, Mom. Please don't rush with the move. I'll try to find another solution to our family issue." The next morning, no one mentioned the previous day's misunderstanding. Trevor left for work first, followed by the grandchildren heading to school. Sarah was busy in the kitchen, but she didn't invite her mother-in-law to breakfast or lunch. The elderly woman's gnawing hunger didn't let her rest. Her stomach growled loudly, and she decided to go to the kitchen. "Can I have a cup of tea at least?" Sarah turned her whole body towards her mother-in-law and sarcastically remarked, "I think you ate enough for a whole month yesterday. Maybe consider a fasting day." Abigail didn't argue with her daughter-in-law. She returned to her corner in the hallway and tried to get some sleep. Unexpectedly, Sarah's loud footsteps echoed, and then a plate clattered on a stool. "Here's your tea. Drink it." After an empty cup of tea, the feeling of hunger only intensified. But the elderly woman was afraid to make another attempt to get something to eat. She hoped that Sarah would go to the store, and then she could take some food from the fridge. And indeed, soon the young woman was getting ready to go to the supermarket. As soon as she disappeared behind the door, Abigail sneaked into the kitchen. She made herself a few sandwiches and reheated some tea. But before she could properly eat, Sarah unexpectedly returned, catching her mother-in-law at the scene. She poured out all her hatred back to eating. "I see. I wonder where all the groceries from the fridge disappeared to. Aren't you ashamed, Abigail? You're not alone in this house. Look at her eating and not choking." It's unclear how long the daughter-in-law would have continued her accusations if Trevor hadn't appeared. Most likely, Sarah didn't close the door properly, and the man quietly entered the apartment. "Don't understand what's going on here, Sarah. Are you talking to my mom like that? Have you created chaos in the house?" Although the young woman was taken aback, she didn't intend to back down. Do you think it's normal that your mom rummages through the fridge? I can't even buy groceries in time. She devours everything at an incredible speed, and she does it secretly. Sarah, what are you saying? Maybe you'll put a lock on it. I didn't think that access to food in our house was restricted. Trevor, why twist the situation? Both you and the kids can take whatever you want at any time. But Trevor decisively interrupted his wife. Understood. We don't have the same conditions for everyone. Only my old mom is eating you out of house and home and not letting us live in peace. Fine, I'll find a solution to this problem. I think, dear, you'll be pleased. Sensing trouble, Sarah began to plead with her husband. Trevor, don't get upset. You misunderstood me. But the man made it clear that he didn't want to continue this conversation. The next day, after lunch, Trevor appeared. Two strong men followed him silently, hauling a refrigerator into the apartment. Trevor pointed to the door of Sarah's room. Guys, bring it in there if it's not too much trouble. Move the bed there too. I'll pay you extra for it. Trevor nodded towards Abigail's makeshift bed. The men effortlessly moved the furniture and left. Sarah watched everything with wide open eyes. Trevor, what does this mean? Leaving his wife's question unanswered, Trevor walked back into the room. He started throwing his wife's belongings into the hallway, his expression showing that he was doing it with obvious satisfaction. Sarah couldn't bear such mockery any longer. I demand an explanation. What is this autocracy? The man calmly replied, You, dear, did whatever you wanted until recently, and I tolerated it. I endured your antics and mistreatment of an elderly person. But every patience has its limits. You seem to have forgotten what kind of dowry you married into. Your memory has erased all the good things my mother did for us. Your parents didn't even contribute a penny, they only got used to taking. Well, no wonder you inherited not the best human qualities from them. Trevor, please come to your senses. I've asked you many times about that. It was on your initiative that I insisted my mom sell the house. You promised her that she would live with us like a queen, but in reality, you scold an old person for a piece of bread. It's outrageous, Trevor. I'll change, I promise you, Sarah. I don't believe you. You're unlikely to change, so I decided. Trevor gave an expressive look to his wife, and she turned pale with fear. I decided to reverse the process. What does that mean? Very simple. We'll exchange this large apartment for two smaller ones. I think my mom will be happy with a well-appointed one-bedroom apartment, and 2 rooms will be enough for us, as it was before. I've already posted an ad. Now she'll live in the room you occupied. And by the way, you should find a job. Sarah helplessly lowered her head. She began to pack her things, and it was evident that she was crying. Trevor decided to draw a line under the incident. I consider the incident closed. Oh, I almost forgot. Return the pension card to my mom. She can order the groceries she wants herself, and she'll keep them in her own refrigerator. I hope all parties are satisfied with the resolution of this issue. Surprisingly, Trevor indeed managed to turn the situation around. Abigail, comfortably settled in the former room of the daughter-in-law, bought a small TV and could watch her favorite shows anytime. In the evenings, the grandchildren disappeared into their grandmother's room, and only Sarah sat alone in the kitchen, waiting for her husband to return from work. Thanks to her son's decision, Abigail regained confidence in herself. Her well-being also significantly improved. So, the elderly woman often spent time outdoors in the company of other retirees. Several months passed, but the issue of swapping apartments did not disappear from the agenda. Almost every day, interested people visited their apartment. After such visits, Sarah cried. It was easy to guess from her written eyes. One day, Abigail asked her son, Trevor, do you really want to exchange this apartment? Yes, Mom. What else can we do if my women can't get along under one roof? But there's so much space here for the kids. They have a big room. Sometimes you have to sacrifice something. But I don't want to sacrifice your health and peace on the altar of my family happiness. Several more weeks passed. One evening, there was a knock on the door of Trevor's apartment. When Trevor opened it, he saw the cheerful Madison, Mom's friend. Looked youthful, wearing a stylish curly fur coat and a mohair beret playfully tilted to one side. Expecting guests? Well, I've dropped by, she said, not at all embarrassed. She hung up her coat, kicked off her boots. Trevor, where's my bosom buddy? Come in. She's in Mom's room. Oh, that's cool. Abigail even has her own room. And where's your wife? She's a bit under the weather, taking a rest. I see. All right, we'll set the table ourselves. I popped into the store, got some goodies. Madison started pulling out bags and boxes from her seemingly bottomless bag. The finishing touch to the sweet still life was a luxurious cake adorned with candied fruits. Gwen and Ben were delighted with these gifts. They settled comfortably in Grandma's room, listening to the conversation of the friends. Under the reminiscences of the two companions, they fell asleep while Madison and Abigail talked almost until dawn. The evening of the next day, Madison casually mentioned, Trevor, you won't mind if I take your mom with me, would you? We're two lonely old seagull. It'll be cozier for us to spend our remaining years together. She was clearly in a cheerful mood. Don't worry, we'll behave ourselves, and we won't bring any men into the house. Madison winked at her friend. Or will we? Abigail's positive mood rubbed off on her. Over the past year, she had forgotten how a joke and a smile and her friend's visit brought back that ability. We'll play it by ear. Actually, I don't mind male company, but with you, I have to be on guard. Trevor, she once stole a suitor from under my nose in our youth. The elderly ladies laughed in unison. Trevor watched them and couldn't be happier. His mom seemed rejuvenated, with a lively spark in her eyes. Again, these changes pleased the son, but at the same time, he felt sad that his mother hadn't found a refuge in his home. He understood that moving in with a friend was a sacrifice made by a loving mother. He wanted to do something for her. Abigail seemed to read her son's thoughts. I want you to be happy, son, and I ask you not to worry. Everything will be fine. Throughout this time, Sarah was in her room. She understood that the whole family had gathered there, having fun and enjoying themselves, and no one thought to invite her. Only now did she realize how her mother-in-law must have felt when Sarah ignored her and kept her hidden from everyone. Now Sarah too felt unwanted. A week ago, she would have been angry and caused a scene, but now a deep hurt engulfed her, followed by a feeling that could be called remorse. Sarah finally went to see off her mother-in-law. Her arrogance disappeared without a trace. She approached her mother-in-law and unexpectedly burst into tears. For God's sake, forgive me. Sarah herself didn't understand how these words escaped her, but somehow she instantly felt lighter. I hold no grudge against you, Sarah. I just want you and Trevor to be happy. In the first days after Abigail's departure, tension lingered in the house. Sarah understood that Trevor blamed her for his mother leaving. She also saw how it looked from the outside. They sold her mother's house, and now she was sent to live with an old neighbor. One day, Trevor caught Sarah in the kitchen as she was packing a pie, with the children impatiently shuffling nearby. Where are you all going, Gwen? Gwen ran to her father. Dad, Mom and I are going to visit Grandma. Mom called her, and Grandma is waiting for us. She says she misses us a lot. Trevor looked at his wife in surprise, and she smiled awkwardly. We won't be long, just a couple of hours. We'll have tea with Grandma and come back. Trevor was even taken aback. Apparently, he needed to go through all of this for Sarah to finally reconcile with her mother. But why do you need to go? Let me drive you. I haven't seen my mom in a long time. We only communicate by phone. The children jumped around, shouting, and Trevor grabbed the prepared bag. Wow, did you put bricks in there? Well, what bricks? Gifts for Mom and Madison, medicines. She dictated a whole list to me. They stayed at Madison's until the evening. The kids played in the street, and Trevor suddenly realized that everything had been wrong. How could it be living in the city and not having such a little house? He had some money set aside, and a wild idea crept into his mind. He returned to the table. So, Madison, is there any house for sale nearby? Not too big but lively? The woman looked at him cunningly and smiled. Looks like you'll be having a housewarming party soon, Abigail. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.